notes. There they are. Before we begin this, it's been kind of a emotional past couple weeks. I've been here, like I said, for 11 years, and it's actually the longest I've been in any one place my entire life. And it gave me some grounding and some realizations that were important for me, but I'm sort of a lot of mixed emotions about leaving. And probably going to choke up a little bit, but I'll try to keep it restrained. Like Daruka was fanning and he was feeling emotions and he had to check the emotions. So, but before I begin, what happened to the others? It's important for me to acknowledge the senior members of our community here. Without them, I would have never been introduced to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And they've given me Prabhupada, so I wanted to give Prabhupada back. This is some very beautiful photographs of Prabhupada that I got some frame for. And I wanted to gift these to our senior Prabhupada disciples here. This is for Sindhamani here. And then I have for our Sureswara Prabhu. This is another beautiful picture of Prabhupada. Yeah, and I have one from Jivananda Prabhu. I don't know if he'll be here later, maybe. If not, one of his disciples can pass it on to him, but this is the one I was going to give to Jivananda Prabhu. So, you know, if you want the box to hold it in, you can have the box. Oops. You want the box? Yeah. Okay. Protect it. It is said that the beauty of the chikora bird is its sweet song. The beauty of a woman is her chastity. Even an ugly man becomes beautiful if he is learned with knowledge. And the beauty of a saintly person is their forgiveness. So you're all very beautiful, saintly people. And I just asked if I've ever said anything or done anything to any of you that has hurt you. Please forgive me. I just want to get that out of the way. Hare Krishna. Okay, so the backdrop of current events in the world. There's always been war. You know, historically, there's never been a period in human history where there's not been war and conflict. But now it's really hitting home because, well, literally it's hitting us at the gas pump. So we're feeling it maybe a little more now because we're directly involved with the other wars. You know, we're indirectly involved, but now we're directly involved. So disturbing the minds of so many people. And ironically, the foundational teaching of Krishna consciousness, the Bhagavad Gita, was spoken on a battlefield. And a very, very strong theme in the Bhagavad Gita is peace. The inner peace that is the result of one making tangible spiritual progress in life. And peace, in one sense, is it's resolving a conflict. So why are we not peaceful all the time? What is the conflict? Is it external, or is it internal, or is it a combination of both? Or, what's the relationship between our inner conflict and how does it outwardly express itself in conflict, between tribes, communities, nations, ethnic groups, religious groups, political groups? And the Bhagavad Gita, or the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, really goes very deep. At the core of all conflict is an inner conflict that is unresolved, and then it manifests externally. So that's what we're going to speak about. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in the second chapter, Krishna describes how without being connected to God, one can have neither transcendental intelligence or a steady mind, without which there's no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So peace is really a precursor to happiness. And who doesn't want to be happy? Everybody's looking for anandamaya vyasat. By nature, we are pleasure seekers. We want to be happy. So the ultimate, and then also in the second chapter, Krishna describes how the peace of the transcendentalist is likened to a very deep ocean that has many rivers flowing into it, but the ocean remains calm because of its depth, its great depth. And the Pacific Ocean, Pacific literally means calm. So how do we achieve this level of consciousness where we're undisturbed? And in medieval cathedrals in Europe, they have this design. It's called the Wheel of Fortune, not to be confused with the game show. It has this wheel, and there are these different stages on the wheel where one is like rising up to be a king, and then one is reigning as a king, and then one is falling away, and then one is, so there's this Wheel of Fortune that's sometimes up, sometimes down. That's the nature of material happiness, is that it's not always there. It's sometimes there, sometimes it's not. Or even peace. If we are defining peace as just, having a peaceful situation, so to speak, externally, that's not the peace that's being described in the Bhagavad Gita. That's a temporary situation where things are relatively going smoothly. Maybe your health isn't challenging you, or your significant others in your relationship, there's no conflict, but there's always something going on where there's some conflict in the material world. So if we're basing our peace on just things going smoothly, we'll never be really peaceful. Just temporarily, we may feel some relief, but the deep consciousness that, like the ocean, on the surface of the ocean, there are waves and storms and so on. But if you go down deep, you're aloof. But if we remain on a superficial platform of consciousness, very, won't have to say anything more than that. If we remain on the surface and we don't go inward, which is the ultimate resolution of this conflict, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita that there is a meeting of God within the heart. That is really the only way that we can attain real peace. In Christian theology, it's called unitive consciousness. That one becomes so close to God And our teachings is that you don't become, homogenized, you remain an individual, but there's such unity. There's such closeness in purpose, in desire, that we say, just like when people get married, sometimes, two are becoming one. There's, I don't know what traditions, but that's a common thing. And when, that there's a dissolving of selfishness, basically moving from me to we, and the idea of this inner conflict. It actually begins, Krishna describes in the 7th chapter. There's a very powerful verse. It says, Itcha dvesa svamuteda dvandva mohina bharata. Sarva bhutani samoham sarga yante parantapa. That we all enter into the material atmosphere deluded by dualities arisen from desire and hate. And the inner conflict, or the real conflict, is not with other nations or other people. It's an inner conflict with God. That we have a posture of competition with God, that we want to be the center, we want to be the enjoyer, we want to be in an unnatural condition. We enjoy, but we are cooperative enjoyers. Prabhupada once said that we enjoy, and Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." And what is salt in the Beatitudes? You're the salt of the earth. So what is salt? Salt enhances the flavor of it. You don't have a plate of salt. It's like, would you like some French fries with your salt? No, salt it enhances the taste of everything. So like when Jesus said, "You're the salt of the earth," we have this is our constitutive nature, that we are servants of others. That's how we enjoy. And Prabhupada's classic example was the hand is a part of the body, and the hand has to pick up food and put it into the mouth, to the stomach. A hand cannot directly enjoy food. It'll become emaciated. So as long as we are in that mood of competition, like I am trying to, maybe not overtly, people aren't thinking I am God, although some politicians seem to speak like that. But it's you could say on a subconscious level that we are trying to usurp the position of God as being the center. And so this is the real conflict that expresses itself externally in this, it's fueled by, in Sanskrit, the ahankara, the false ego, where we see ourselves as separate from God. That's basically the definition of material consciousness. That and ultimately the principal definition of God being the source of everything. Janmadya sayataha. God is the source of everything. There's nothing that's separate from God. And any idea that I'm separate from God, or anything that we experience as being separate from God, is considered illusion. So how do we dismantle, or how do we correct that distorted consciousness or thinking? Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita that this whole material world is a perverted reflection of the real spiritual realm. It's like a upside down banyan tree, he describes in the 15th chapter. So we're all a little upside down. We think we're the center. We got it all backwards, God is the center. And our happiness is in serving God and serving all living beings, seeing them as parts and parcels of God. So that duality that's set up, that Krishna speaks of, when one has this posture of actually envy, Envy of God. And envy is a very complex emotion because there's actually some admiration in there. You admire something that someone else has, but there's some hatred, like, you shouldn't have it. Like, I want it, but it's a very difficult, and actually, Vyasadeva describes that this is the real problem of all of the unwanted things in our heart: lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride. It's all contained within matsarya, or envy. In the second verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, describes that only those who are fully pure in heart can really enter into this understanding of spiritual knowledge. And the word is this matsarya, that he said that fully pure in heart means one who's free from envy. So in the 9th chapter in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, he says, because you're never envious of me, I shall now explain this most confidential knowledge and realization, and you'll be relieved from all miseries by having this realized knowledge. It's not just intellectual understanding, that the knowledge has to be experienced. It has to be realized. And the traditions of all legitimate or bona fide religious traditions, you could say the doctrinal side, you've got the liturgies, and you've got the philosophy, the theology, but then you have the mystical side, which is really the experiential side, where we're actually contacting God within the heart. And Krishna describes towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, how this surrender to the Lord in the heart brings about peace. He says, he's building up to this crescendo in the 18th chapter, where he says, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart. He's directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated on this machine made of material energy, this material body. And then in the next verse, he says, Osina Bharata, surrender unto him utterly, speaking to the Lord in the heart. Surrender. It's almost like Krishna speaking about someone else. Krishna's telling Arjuna, surrender to the Lord in your heart. But that Lord is Krishna, who's externally manifest as the spiritual master, because Krishna's establishing this foundational principle that if you want to meet the Lord in the heart, you have to meet the external manifestation of the Lord in the heart in the form of the spiritual master, a guru, a mentor, a spiritual mentor, because we're not presently able to contact the Lord directly in the heart. So we have manifestations within the material creation where we can contact that Lord in the heart. But the whole idea is to redirect our consciousness inwardly, to look out externally at manifestations of that Lord in the heart, but ultimately meet that Lord in the heart. So Krishna says, Osina Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Now, the key here is that it's by his grace. It's not by our effort. But there is some, anyone remember that show, Will and Grace? Yes. So that show, actually the title of that show, it's taken from a Jewish theologian named Martin Buber. I think he was in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And he wrote a book called I and Thou, I think it was called. I Art Thou, or something like that. I can't remember. But anyways, the idea is that we have to make a decision. We have our free will. We have to make an effort, in a sense that we have to let go of this long cherished desire to be God, to be the center, to be the enjoyer. So it takes that will, but then it's ultimately the grace of God that knowledge or that realization is revealed through the grace of God. So that's actually, the title of that show. It was It was spun from that theologian's work. So now the big, I can't see what time it is. What is it, 6:23? Okay, yeah, makes sense. Great. Surrender. Solve all your problems. Become peaceful. So what's the problem? What's the hang up? Why don't we do it? And Krishna says, Vita raga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, taking refuge of me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me and thus attained transcendental love for me. So being freed from attachment. And where does this attachment take place? It's expressed in the mind. The mind is like a screen, but the attachment goes deeper. It goes into the actual seat of consciousness, the heart. It's expressed through the mind. And Krishna describes that when you contemplate the objects of the senses, attachment. He says, Jayato vishan pumsa sangas teshu bhajayate. When you think, when you contemplate about enjoying the objects of the senses, you become attached, and then a strong desire, so they have all these banner ads. You go shopping for something and suddenly, every time you turn on your computer or your phone, there are these ads saying, yeah, hey, remember this, you were looking for that, and oh yeah, I forgot about that. Let me see. And you become, yeah, I need that. And then when that strong desire is there, and we become frustrated. Either we can't get it or we get it and it doesn't live up to our expectations. We become frustrated, we become angry. And then from anger comes delusion. People do crazy things when they're angry. We say things that we know, or we say hurtful things to people we love when we're angry, or physically assault people. So from anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. We can't function. It's like being DUI, driving while you're intoxicated. Like you pull up to a red light. What do? Do I stop? Do I go? Like you can't function. So when our memory is bewildered, and then your intelligence is lost and you fall down to the material pool. So it's a group of how to approach and uproot these deep attachments to trying this envy of God that we may not even be conscious of. But it's being expressed in all these dysfunctional behaviors and desires that cause us so much disturbance. So the resolution of all the conflict is purifying the heart, and the principal means is given through transcendental sound vibration, through hearing the name of God vibrated, hearing descriptions of God, the word of God given in sacred literatures. By hearing that, the heart becomes gradually cleansed of this deep-rooted envy of God. But it takes patience, and there's a lot of crises that we will go through as these various anarthas or unwanted things rise up in our consciousness. But the root of it all is this envy, So anyhow, those are some thoughts. And if anybody has a reflection or a question or a comment, yes, Nitai Niranjana Prabhu.
What does God in the heart mean? Is heart mean like emotional center? Is that like physical location? Or what does that mean?
Just the region, Prabhupada is the region of the heart, that area. And Prabhupada describes that even material science recognizes that the body is being animated through the energy from the heart, and even he gives into kind of like a biological thing where he said the oxygen is carried through the heart, through the blood, and it gains energy through the presence of the soul, the super soul, and then that's how consciousness is spread throughout the body. That's why when your circulation is cut off, you can't feel anything, because consciousness is spread throughout the body through the blood. Anything? Yes, Tanika.
In order to get peace from conflict, wouldn't that take like communication? Of course, when we're connecting with Krishna in the heart, or that's also a form of communication or association. Right? So how can one have that association if they can't associate even on a human level?
Well, we're aspiring to move from a novice position where we really can't discern properly when we should try to resolve these conflicts. Some people we just have to stay away from. That's the level of the intermediate stages where we offer our love to God. We make friendships with those who are in godly consciousness. We try to uplift those who are unaware of God, but we avoid those that are inimical towards God or inimical towards God's devotees. We're advised to respect them from a distance, and that's something that it's difficult because we have this dualistic mind that Krishna speaks of. When you enter into this material atmosphere of duality, when we have a dualistic mind, it's very difficult to maintain two apparently contradictory feelings. That a person can be virtuous on the one hand, but they can also have bad qualities that are harmful, these anarthas, these unwanted things. So it's very difficult with a dualistic mind, to accommodate that someone can be both good and bad. We either want one or the other. The dualistic mind is, they're either good or they're bad. They can't be both. But that's the reality, is that we're all kind of a mixture, of good and bad. But when someone is in an unhealthy state of consciousness, where they're actually inimical towards God and other living beings, then you respect them, you honor them by keeping a distance, So, does that help? No.
I just wonder if that really brings peace.
Well, one time, I just recently heard this little anecdote. We're advised to rise early in the morning, because the ideal hours for prayer and meditation are in the early hours. And some of Prabhupada's disciples were not getting up early, and Prabhupada exhibited a lot of anger and was chastising them. Like, what are you doing? So one of the disciples later came to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, you seem, like you're very angry, with us. Like, I'm sorry. And Prabhupada said, I am not angry. So it sure seems like you're angry. I am not angry, but it is my duty as your spiritual master to correct you. But I am not angry. So there's inner consciousness, and then there's the external thing. Our interactions with people. It's hard to read what a person's motivations are. And sometimes we misread because of some behavior. We label some ill intent behind them, but maybe it's just they have some. In Sanskrit, the word is samskaras. There's some impressions left. There's some good or bad trauma, that is causing one to behave in a way which is disturbing us. So, we try to give people the benefit of the doubt, that, maybe not label them as having ill intent, And that will sort of smooth the communication. Like if we don't assume that they have, their motives are, they have any kind of, what the right word is, ill motives. That's in conflict resolution, that's one of the biggest issues, is that people, they assume they understand someone's motives. And when you come in, you're predisposed. You already think somebody is, they're motivated by this or that. So then your perception or the way you analyze everything they do and say is being filtered through that that lens that that's a pretty that's sort of like taking that position of God. Only God knows the heart of everyone. He's situated right, like he knows the heart. And if we're assuming we know someone's motives and intentions, that it could be an actual way that we're sort of playing God, and that causes conflict. We're competing for lordship. So I think that's just one angle that you'd say that perhaps our communication is being blocked. We may be saying the right words. Well, they have that nonviolent communication, phrase things in an appropriate way. But if you're it's more about your consciousness. Just like I'm speaking, and hopefully it's reasonable and rational and intelligible. But what's really happening is that my consciousness is being expressed through the sound vibration. It's not really what I'm saying that's impacting you. It's my consciousness. So if if we're assuming any ill feelings towards someone, that people are going to pick up on that. It doesn't really matter if you use the right language, if you use the right whatever communication techniques. You can take communication seminars and learn how to effectively communicate. Not to dismiss that; those are certainly helpful. But it really comes down to what is the state of our heart. Are we compassionate? I think that's about it. I think I went overtime.
Nice.
6:35. Yeah, thank you. So it's like I said, it's a lot of mixed emotions. This community is a stellar community. And especially in North America, we so many devotees that come traveling through. They're just blown away by the family feel, and they really appreciate it. So I'm hoping that whatever nourishment I've received for being part of this community, I can bring into my future relationships. I'm a little nervous about, sort of like I'm getting on my Jaladuda here, my budget truck rental is my Jaladuda. I mean, I know people there, and there are other devotees there. There's a community of devotees there, but this is, really sort of like it's been my home for 11 years, and it's a lot of tears have been shed the last couple of weeks, thinking about leaving. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.